In our union, there are many ways to build power. And our next panel is going to share some of those ways with us. Sisters, brothers, siblings, it is my pleasure and honor to introduce somebody that I get to call my friend. John Lepley from the Education Membership Development Department to our panel, and he's going to introduce our wonderful panelists. Give it up for them.
All right. Good morning, Steelworkers. How's everyone doing today? Okay. So we have a pretty incredible panel this morning, but before we get to them, I want to talk about yesterday. How are your classes? Okay, that's not enough. I'm going to fidget up here like crazy, so I'm going to come down and I'm going to ask some of you to tell us what you learned yesterday, all right? So who'd like to tell everyone what you learned? Look, I know enough of you to come and put some of you on the spot, so some people better start volunteering. Is that a hand back there? Okay. Okay, walk towards me, brother. We'll meet in the middle. Introduce yourself, brother. Tell us one thing you learned yesterday.
Okay, I didn't have a speech prepared, but here we are. Trey Wilkins, Local 1000 out of upstate New York. I'm not going to really nail off what I learned, but I will say during one of our seminars, we damn, I didn't really think about this one at all. During one of our seminars, we did some role play. You know, some people played Gen Z, then millennials, then boomers, etc. We got the opportunity to play the role of these people and you know, come up with a situation that we actually face in the workplace and figure out how we can resolve that amongst the age gap that we face inside of our workplaces. It seemed kind of silly at first, but it actually made a lot of sense when the time came to it. When we were done with the class, it was a lot more clearing, I guess. I got nothing else. Thank you.
Thank you, brother. How about one other person? Okay. All right, sister, come on up, walk towards me. All right, sister, real quick, introduce yourself and tell us all what you learned.
Hi, I'm Dejanay from Local 7600. I took mass incarceration yesterday because I thought I knew a lot about it. But the most intriguing part to me was learning that the 13th Amendment did free the slaves, but it was also the start of where slaves or people that were going to be incarcerated in the future were leased out to establishments. Like now in California, there's been a bunch of wildfires over the last years, and inmates are leased to the fire department to fight fires for free, pretty much like 10 cents an hour. So that's where it all started. It was a very interesting class, so I'm glad I took it.
Thank you, sister. So, all the classes you had yesterday, mass incarceration, the economy, I heard you had a kick-ass labor history class. All of those issues, topics, our panelists are engaging with in one way or other in their communities. So to start with, we have Brother Travis Dupree, an organizer with Fight for 15 from Washington, D.C. We have Sister Jessica Montgomery from Local 2020 in District 6, Sudbury, Ontario. All right. Sister Erica Clemens from 9 to 5. It's a national organization for women's rights on the job and outside the workplace. And then Sister Lindsay Disler, an organizer here at the United Steelworkers organizing department. So they're going to be talking about their stories, but to get all of you talking again, I want to pose 2 questions to you all. And I'll give you 2 minutes at your tables and at your chairs in the back to talk about this, and then I'll ask one of our panelists to debrief with you. So here's the first question. When you go to your bargaining table, or as union members in your community, who do you represent? Do you represent the members of your unit, or do you represent the working class? That's the first question, all right? The second one, a little different. If you had a theme song for your table, or for your cluster of chairs, what would it be? So figure that out in 2 minutes, and then I'll ask a panelist to debrief with you, okay? Okay, folks, time's up. Let's come back together. All right, has everyone got these questions figured out? I hear one yes. How about the rest 899 of yous? Okay, great. All right, so to help us think through the first question and to kick this panel off, Sister Jessica, you're gonna tell her. Do you represent your members, or do you represent the working class? So, Jessica?
Oh, is my mic on? Okay.
Your mic.
So stand up if you think that we bargain for our members. Stand up. Stand up. Okay. All right. So stand up if you bargain for the working class, and remain standing if you. So do you think we do both? Yeah. Yeah, we do. We definitely do both. Oh my goodness.
All right, thank you, Jessica. Travis, you want to help them through question number 2?
So it's a question that I've heard before, and I've always heard interesting answers. So I'd be happy to hear what some of the songs that come from the tables. Anybody like to volunteer a song or two?
All right, I'm Brad Buffalo, local 412, District 10. We came up with Luda, move bitch, get out the way. But, we ain't talking about the people, our peers in front of us. We're talking about the company holding us back. Screw that, get the hell out of our way.
All right. That was interesting. Any others?
We came up with war. Why can't we be friends?
Okay.
And I would love to ask, so why, who are you referring to? If you don't mind me asking. Okay, a good point. So you're saying you're referring to all of us. Why can't we all be friends? That was great. One more, please. Anyone?
There you go.
Chance the Rapper, no problems.
Oh, so that was 2 good ones. We heard We Are the Champions and Chance the Rapper, no problems. Interesting. So not typical movement songs, right? But this is next generation movement, right? So it makes a lot of sense. So thank you all.
All right. So, look, the first question, there's no simple answer to it. It opens up a whole bunch of other questions that our panelists are going to help us talk through. The second question, on one hand, it's kind of silly, and we heard some pretty interesting songs. But if you think about it, there has not been a social movement in Canadian, U.S., history, or any other country represented here where music did not play a role in that movement. And that's what we want to focus on. We want to get that energy up here, all right? So turning to our panelists, I guess I'll put Lindsay on the spot first. Lindsay, you've been involved in some pretty big organizing campaigns the past couple years in the workplace, but also the surrounding community. So could you tell us really quickly about your work and how you're moving people to get active and engaged, sister?
Yeah, so I work in the organizing department, and I specialize in community organizing for a lot of our external campaigns here in Pittsburgh. Some of the campaigns I have worked on, am working on, are the University of Pittsburgh grad and faculty campaigns, the Carnegie Library Workers campaign, and now a LGBTQ mental health facility campaign. I focus on building community support through this group called Seesaw, which came out of the grad and faculty campaigns at the University of Pittsburgh. It's community and students for academic workers. And part of the reason that we focus in so hard on building community support, and especially at universities like undergrad support, is because, what do universities care about, like all corporations? Money. And they make a lot of money from the undergrads there. They also make a lot of money coming in from various grants, as well as money from the state through people's tax dollars. So the community also has a very important role in this. So we started organizing around that campaign, building support, and spreading the word, because often universities, businesses will try and pit the communities against the workers, making it so much harder to fend off, the boss attack, where bosses will go after workers who are trying to organize. However, when you have massive community support, it can completely negate a lot of that. Like the Prasad Center we're working with right now, because immediately right off the bat, so many folks from the LGBTQ plus community have shown support and directed it at the board. They've actually not been as aggressive with their union busting towards the workers, which rocks.
Okay. All right, thank you, sister. So I forgot to mention this. I don't think you want to hear me asking questions for the next half hour. So I've asked Sister Miranda Fitz from District 11. Could you stand up, sister? And Brother Justin Wills from District 7. Well, Justin, stand up. I don't know if that will help. Okay, so I love you, Justin. If you got a question and you'd like to write it down, they'll come to you with an index card, and then they'll run it up to me. And there's also, if folks want to ask questions from the audience, there is an audience mic out there as well. So I'd like you to engage the panelists instead of just me. But while that's going on, I'd like to ask, how many of you ever had a Mick job growing up?
A what?
Mick job, McDonald's, Hardee's, Burger King, you name it, stand up. Okay. How were your wages when you worked there? Yeah. They sucked. All right, and unfortunately, jobs like that are becoming more and more commonplace in our economy. So our panelist, Brother Travis Dupree from Fight for 15, has been working his ass off to get these folks a decent wage and a union on the job. So Travis, could you tell us about your work and your strategy for going forward?
Sure. So good morning, and thanks again for having me. You know, I get to do conferences and conventions a lot. I do the coalition work for the Fight for 15. So I travel the country and figure out ways for us to work with other sectors of the movement, right? Whether it's unions, sisters and brothers, racial justice, immigrant justice, or what have you. And what I found is that everywhere people are hurting, right? Like working people are hurting everywhere, like literally everywhere. I've been from Iowa, to Chicago, all around the country, and the story is the same. And not too many of us understand that. Years ago when I was in school, fast food jobs were how my friends made some spending money. Now, people do that to raise families, which is virtually impossible. So the Fight for 15, which started 8 years ago, has opened not just my eyes, but a lot of people's eyes around the country. There's 64 million people that make below $15 an hour. And even making $15 an hour can't really take care of a family, right? So a lot of people I've been introduced to work multiple jobs and suffer tremendous atrocities while at work, while trying to get to and from work. And what they always say is just not right. So I've been fortunate to work with groups that have helped us put up this fight. And to this day, I think 20 million people have received raises upwards of $15 an hour because of the work of the Fight 15, but most importantly, because of community and partner groups, right? It's not just the brave women and men that work these jobs. It's people that step up. USW has been a great partner, right? Among others, that have walked people back to McDonald's when they've gotten fired or reprimanded, right? Like the power to walk back has changed my life, let alone our workers' life. To commit to someone that you're going to support them if they take this brave action. I always say, like, people risk $8 an hour jobs, like literally walk off of their job to make better lives for their families. And it's changed a lot of lives. And one thing I would leave with people, which I learned when we started this, we always talked about the $15 an hour, because that was the easiest thing to talk about, right? People everywhere get that. Everywhere I've been in the country, people say, yeah, people should make more money. But when you talk to the people that are doing the jobs, that's not the most important thing. Like, they just want some dignity at work, right? They don't want to get their butts grabbed. They don't want to be cursed out, right? They don't want to be spat on. They don't want to be threatened. So this is a movement, right? We were talking earlier about how unions are working better together than ever. We're at the same tables, right? Groups that we've never worked with, we're working with now. So just to see almost 1,000 people in this room, like, I can't wait to get back to our folk to say, like, there's sisters and brothers everywhere that support you, right? And it's growing. So now we have this opportunity to politicize what we're doing. Like, a lot of the fast food workers have never, ever been politically active. They never thought it was a reason to. They never really had access to the information. And now they're throwing their hats in the ring for elections all over the country. Understanding that that's a part of how we change what's happening. So thank you all for having me, and thank you for supporting the brave women and men of the Fight 15 movement.
Thank you, brother. I understand there was a class yesterday where you talked about the 5 standing or mandated committees in the local union. Can folks name them off real quick? Health and safety, organizing, civil human rights, women of steel, and what else? Workers' compensation. So Women of Steel was, I believe, the most recent creation in that, and that has turned into one of the most dynamic parts of our union right now. Incredible activists are coming out of the Women of Steel committees and program in our union. So I'd like to turn to Sister Erica. And your work is 9 to 5, Sister. Could you talk about some of the work you're doing, particularly in a hostile part of the country that has traditionally been hostile to unions? And she's from Hotlanta, Georgia, by the way. Erica?
Thank you. So first of all, I hope somebody captured that playlist that we just went around. That should be the official start of the Next Gen playlist from, and build on that. And what I would say my song for the movement would be, I'm not sure how many folks seen the movie Harriet, but Janelle Monáe have a song called Stand Up. And I think it's very appropriate for this collective liberation that we're trying to attain, especially in the moment now with our administration the way it is, union density, and just the collaboration between unions and community organizations. And like you mentioned, I'm the National Organizing Director for 9 to 5. It's a National Association of Working Women. And we do women's rights in the workplace. So that's sexual harassment, paid leave, salary negotiation, real true base building for women. In Georgia, we focus largely on women of color, marginalized women, to be like their own advocates in the workplace. So a lot of these organizations or a lot of these companies don't have unions, and those workers don't have the protections that the union members have. So we kind of provide some of that training so that they can stand on their own, they're able to fight for themselves, and essentially form a union in some of these smaller employers. A lot of the work that I do now on a national level, my background comes from labor organizing. I was with USW for 8 years, organizing workers in Chicago, Ohio, and Michigan. And I saw a lot of on-the-job harassment, sexual harassment, unbelievable stories that really just catapulted me into this community organizing piece. It's a little freer for me to do the organizing, the type of organizing that I need to do or I feel needs to happen in some of these workplaces, and get them to really share their story. Travis and I was just talking about how we utilize a lot of the community stories, but we don't focus on the healing component of it. These are traumas that these women and some men are experiencing on the workplace. And as a community organizer with 9 to 5, we focus on that healing journey, how to turn them into advocates and not just share their stories, get a lot of likes on social media for the stories that we put out in videos, but truly organize and build real power. I'm also the president for the Atlanta chapter of Coalition of Black Trade Unionists. So when we talk about building union power and building up our brothers and sisters inside the labor movement, we talk about that healing justice as well. Because there are a lot of times that there's issues that happen on the workplace, in a unionized workplace, that just cannot be handled in a proper way. And we are not focusing on our community and our members to give them that healing practice and really focus on their well-being. So that's a little bit of the work that we do.
Thank you, sister. So let me ask you all another question. Who in here has ever been on strike or lockout or some kind of labor dispute like that? Stand up for a second. All right. Okay. How many of you are going into bargaining next year and you're expecting a tough round? Okay, so shout it out real quick. What are some of the stuff you're doing to prepare to get your locals ready for a tough fight? CAT team, internal organizing. You're doing your research. All right, so our next panelist, Sister Jessica, has had one hell of a fight on her hands for the past few months in Sudbury with her employer. and she's been doing a lot of pretty incredible activities to rub the company's nose and frankly, in their bullshit that they're doing. So Jessica, could you tell us about that and how you've moved some people to help you out and enlist them in your cause?
Okay, so my name is Jessica Montgomery. I am from USW Local 2020 in Sudbury. So I'm actually a full-time compensation representative for my local. I went on full-time release 2 years ago. However, this past March, I got called back to the bargaining table by my area coordinator at the time, Miles Sullivan, because my workplace had depleted and they had nobody to show up at the bargaining table. So I took on that role again. So I am the unit president of that unit. So currently I am a unit president of 29 locked out home care workers in the province of Ontario. We have been on the picket line since May 31st, and I'm not sure how many of you in this room know the difference between a strike and a lockout, but my coworkers and I did not vote to strike. My coworkers and I were in the workplace working, and my employer changed the lock in front of us and escorted us off the property. So the thing with us having a small group of women where your employer isn't actually in the town that you're in. So we are working in Sudbury at one of the offices of Care Partners. However, our corporate office is in Kitchener, and Care Partners has small other offices across Ontario. So I had to pull together strategic campaign. So I had to strategically campaign this lockout. So some of the things that I am proud of course, we weren't winning on the picket line. We're not a large group, and I do come from a labor background in my home. You'll see in that bio that my dad is actually a union organizer. So I grew up with these morals and values. So some of the things that I had to do was to what we call black ops. So we did the typical petitions, we did the rallies, but you know what, that wasn't getting us back to the bargaining table, that wasn't causing any motion. So how many of you in this room know the address of where your CEO works or lives? Okay, so I had to find that. I had to embarrass her and tell her how much that, you know what, how much myself and my coworkers were worth. So through ghost account Facebook ghost accounts, and I don't know how much I could say without our lawyers getting upset, but some burner phones and things like that. I leafleted my CEO's house. I leafleted her neighbors with a poster that said, "Do you know what you're doing to these home care workers? Do you know what your neighbor is doing?" So she wasn't too happy about that. She called the police, but they didn't do too much about that. So I wouldn't be able to do this without family support from my family that comes from that labor background, as well as my husband, who is, I do have a small child, so he is with him this week, but also of my local union and our district director, and again, our national director. It's pretty great to see when we did a couple Twitter blitzes where we tagged the Ontario health minister in posts and literally blew up her phone with notifications. It's pretty amazing that you see your national director tweeting with you, so that was great. So the Twitter blitz was a big thing that I'm pretty proud of. So in Ontario or Canada, you think that home care is free. So essentially, it is paid by our tax dollars. So when you lock out home care workers, you're locking out people who are being paid by your tax dollars. So our clients' care is being paid for by our tax dollars. So I tried to get a hold of our Ontario government, and the Ontario government told me that they don't get involved in the bargaining process. But in the province of Ontario, we know that that's horse shit because the Ontario government legislates workers back to work. They freeze public sector worker wages, so we know that they do get involved in the bargaining process. So that was a lie. So the Ontario Health Minister, I decided that, you know what, the Ontario government and Doug Ford, they're pretty proud of their Twitter followers. So we blasted them pretty good on Twitter with coming up with predetermined like tweets and hashtags. So every time that we tweeted at the Ontario Health Minister, she'd get notifications. And then everyone that followed her, and we were trending on Twitter for a while. So we have a pretty good social media game, and that I'm really proud of.
All right. Thank you, sister. All right, for folks heading into bargaining, do some of you have some new ideas you're thinking of trying out? Okay. So that was really the questions I had. So are there any from the audience or panelists? Do you have questions for your audience to engage them in this discussion? There is a mic out there. Where are we at?
Right here.
All right, way in the back. Okay.
All right, my name is Kenny Sheldon from District 1, Local 9309. I commend you, Travis, and I can't remember your name, young lady, our sister, that are working to get the restaurant employees more money and getting unionized. I used to be a restaurant worker years ago, and I know how hard that job is. And people don't realize how hard it is. Everybody think it's an unskilled job and don't think that they deserve to make that $15. And I argue with people every day about, because we're not getting that cost of living raise anymore, everything keeps going up, and our raises ain't going up, our wages ain't going up, they're not moving, we gotta fight for that. I commend y'all for doing that, and how would I handle the situation trying to argue with people about these folks do need to get this money to make a living. Everybody deserves to make a living, to live and be happy with their family.
So I can say this, like I've definitely been in that same predicament. I was a bartender. Sometimes I miss it. It is some good money sometimes, but a bartender, restaurant worker. One thing we gotta start thinking about when we talk about building power. We know we can go on the picket lines. We stand strong with labor and non-labor members, but we got to start flipping these seats as elected officials. As union members, we have to start flipping those seats because we know the policies that need to be passed in order to properly affect the lives of working class people. It is down at all of our capitals. So one thing is like starting a pipeline of just like elected officials or folks that want to run for office. I can say my background is definitely in organizing. I will shut down some shit in a minute. This year, I decided to shift, and I actually ran for office in Georgia, city council. I didn't win my seat, but I have completely organized that community, and that's what organizers do. We organize the community that we live in, that we work in, to make sure that they are properly advocating for the policies that they need. So we definitely want to keep them in the march, in the act of doing things, but as union members, we have to start getting back some of these seats in our local communities to start flipping those policies, especially around minimum wage.
And just to finish up, so it's three things. First, great question. One is, and I had this conversation a lot too, brother, like, who is someone else, like, so what I say is, like, who the hell are you, when they ask that question, to determine what someone else's work is worth, right? Like, there's dignity in all work, right? And, like, who are we to say what someone's worth, right? And when it comes to McDonald's or fast food or large corporations, so Steve Easterbrook was the CEO of McDonald's. He was just fired 2 weeks ago for having a consensual relationship with a McDonald's employee and received a $40 million severance package. $40 million to go away, right, after what he did. And when it was announced, I was actually in Houston with McDonald's workers, and they were shocked, right? Like, they work every day, and they can't get a paid day off, you know, or unpaid day off just unscheduled. And this dude just got $40 million for having a consensual relationship, as it may have been, but $40 million to go away. So there's money to pay employees, right? And third, like Erica said, like we have to elect our own people. And it doesn't have to be someone that comes before you. It could be anyone in this room, right? Like, so I tell people, like, we have to have union members run for a local office. You know, I grew up thinking that it was a certain type of person that had to be elected. You have to speak the King's English. You have to have this big background. Anyone can run for office. And like you said, whether we win or not, at least we've changed the narrative on how people run and what they're talking about. So I think that's very important. Very important. Support the right people, but more importantly, we need to have people in our local shops running for office.
Thank you, brother. Any more questions out there? Justin, Miranda, do you have any questions on cards?
So,
All right, come on up, Justin. Okay, so question here, and I'll address this to everyone. So if you all want to kind of do a lightning round here and respond to this. How do you build community support in a right-to-work state where unions are viewed unfavorably? And a right-to-work state, just to explain this to folks who might not know, is because of the Taft-Hartley Act passed in 1947, states, and is it 27 or 28 now, can adopt legislation that basically prevents unions and employers from adopting union security language. So this started in the South, predominantly, actually, in the states that originally belonged to the Confederacy, and it's spread like a cancer over the last 50 years or so. So about Erica, since you are from a right-to-work state, and then Lindsay, if you could respond to this next sort of from an organizer's perspective, what advice do you have for folks?
Yeah, so Georgia is probably one of the biggest right-to-work states, but we are still very much union strong in the state of Georgia. And I think a lot of that plays into the fact that there's real organizing happening. And when we talk about bringing in younger generations and completely like fulfilling the needs of labor homes in the state of Georgia, we talk about the needs of the community. So when labor partners with community, you get the real effect of what's happening in homes that are not labor and how to build and have those conversations. The reality of it is a lot of folks, majority of folks in Georgia don't know about labor unions. They didn't come from labor homes, they didn't come from union backgrounds. So it's the community's opportunity to do some of those education pieces and build upon what labor and what union has done. We can no longer go into communities saying labor is responsible for a 40-hour work week. How many of our folks really work 40 hours? How many of our folks are really making a livable wage? So we have to change how we talk about unions. Let's talk more about these apprenticeships, how in a lot of the trades, they're starting at $17 plus just for the apprenticeship pay. Let's talk about non-traditional work fields for women of color, getting into bricklayers, electrical workers, and not do the same old conversations of let's try to organize. We still want to organize home care workers, but we definitely want to build in the fact that there are non-traditional workplaces in labor that is welcoming women of color to be a part of labor families. So we have to change up how we speak about unions. We're in the next generation. So we need to talk as if we're in that generation and not stuck back in the 40s and 50s when labor was very strong and heavy in the homes.
Thank you, sister. Lindsay?
yeah. So I'm actually from Michigan, which is a right-to-work state, and the first 5 years of organizing I did was actually in Michigan. I went to school in Grand Rapids, Michigan, which is an area that is extremely hostile to unions and pretty much any type of organizing. It's pretty much like the DeVos land, like Betsy DeVos. When I was organizing there was the Amalgamated Transit Union that was going after like a fair contract, and there was no organizing going on. We started to work together when I was in this group called United Students Against Sweatshops, and we had to be innovative. We couldn't just rely on the old tactics. So we started building coalitions with people in the community, a lot of immigrant workers, a lot of students, a lot of people from around the entire community. We had to, we started taking direct actions. We did a die-in in the city council meeting, to which they had never seen an action in a city council meeting. They just saw us lay down on the floor with the transit workers in protest of them not bargaining in good faith, and they were just like, we don't know what to do here. There's people on the floor. So we continued to escalate our actions, and that continued to make people start to think about the working conditions of bus drivers and workers broadly in the community. And what started as a group of 5 workers and 5 community folks continued to grow and grow to hundreds. And it actually started to influence, especially the immigrant workers in the community who worked in the blueberry fields. And whenever folks doing labor standard investigations, health and safety investigations would go to these farms, they'd get chased off with guns. So we started organizing around immigrant rights. And after several years, we built a coalition of folks who were focused on labor, and not just union, big U, but unionism, the principles of solidarity that bound us together. And we had made several huge victories through that. Folks' health care that was going to go up to $900 a month in that contract stayed at $150. So we built broad coalitions.
All right, thank you, sister. Travis, would you want to respond? Jessica, knock on wood, comrades from districts 3, 5, and 6, you do not have right to work up there. Keep that shit out of there. But if you'd like to respond to that as well, sister, please.
So I was educated on that yesterday, actually. So I couldn't even actually believe it. But I think that building union solidarity would definitely help that situation, and building it from the ground up, and actually educating especially young workers about what the union actually does for them. Because for myself and my coworkers, I don't know where we'd be without our union right now. So I think that building it from the ground up, the grassroots, and what the union could do for them would help with this situation. And I'm so thankful that I'm not in that situation.
Thank you, sister. Travis, would you want to comment, brother?
I think what was said speaks for itself. I will just say that the traditional unions are in trouble, safe to say, right? So I just think that we have to think of new ways to form worker organizations, worker-led organizations, and not just the traditional way we've done unions, which is why I think days like this or weeks like this are important, figuring out different ways to organize and not have the government have so much power over our lives. We have to take some of that power back, right? So I think new forms and new organizations are huge.
Thank you,
Can I
brother.
just add one more thing real quick to that? One thing that we're doing in 9 to 5 that literally starts next Saturday is starting to form tenants unions. So what that is these apartment complexes in the state of Georgia, you gotta earn 3 times the rent in order to get into a bed, any type of apartment. 1 bedrooms are averaging about $1,000. No worker is gonna be able to get in that. So organizing tenant unions and getting them to organize their home place is essentially gonna lead to broadening that and organizing their workplace. So that gives them the fundamental tools of what it means to have union support to help you have a better life by organizing, just simply paying your bills. So we're not even attaching it with your workplace, but all of that training will come into place. So it'll build a group of folks that knows union, knows organizing, and feels the direct impact of what it means to be a part of a union, and then take that to their workplace.
Thank you, sister. So on the note of new organizing, how many of you stand up, know someone, a friend, a relative, a colleague, not necessarily colleague, someone who needs a union or who wants a job like you have? Stand up.
Everybody.
Should be all of us. What are some of these places? Like Travis was talking about non-traditional kinds of work. We're hearing about the Uber, the gig economy, all that stuff. So where do some of these folks work? Hospitals, manufacturing, where else? groceries, software, you name it, across the economy. It doesn't matter what kind of job it is. You should be in a union, and in our union especially. So you can take your seats. So on that note, real quick, maybe if we could just start with Travis and go on down. What recommendations, advice would you have for these folks? When you go back here, hopefully you all think of yourselves as leaders and as organizers, right? People who can inspire and lead others to organize in their own place, because the boss doesn't give us good jobs, they're bargained for, right? And that starts with the union. So Travis, would you want to respond, brother?
Just really quickly, I would say talk to people, right? Like union members, like literally, it's like being a union leader is not the norm. We take it for granted because that's what we do every day. But I would just say talk to people and don't assume what people care about, right? But like literally ask people what they care about, what means the most to them, and start from there. And I think we learn a lot just by having conversation instead of just assuming things about folk because of the way they look, where they come from, or what have you.
I think that education on what unions do, I think that there is the most important, because there are a lot of people that are anti-union, and I think they don't actually realize that what the union does for them, what we do in the community, how we help our neighbors, and how the union protects our rights. Because yesterday, when in one of my classes, I was in, apparently my instructor did a meeting, and the employer just ripped out a part of the collective agreement. That's wrong. And I think that you need to educate people on their rights, especially young workers. And I am a young worker, but I was a new worker, and I didn't know my rights in the workplace, and I had a union. So I think that education is key, and that's how we're going to continue on with the labor movement. In Canada, it's about 31% of workplaces are unionized, which is amazing, but I think we could do so much better.
So I'll say one thing for sure, we know that USW Next Gen is on point. Like the fact that we have these many folks at this time in this one room that's wanting to learn more, wanting to engage more with their communities is amazing. And you don't see this type of turnout a lot in a lot of these labor union conferences, the diversity that's in the room. So I would just say and challenge everyone in this room to level up. Like whatever you're doing right now, level it up. When we go into 2020, think bigger, think broader, be more bold in our decisions and the things we like to do. Labor is really good at community service. Let's level up on our community service, not just going to feed hungry, homeless, and some of our members that are in need, but when we're out there, let's talk to them about getting them involved in some of these constituency groups. So there's LACLA, there's CBTU, there's LGBTQ Pride at Work. Like there's constituency groups that we can pull community members in to have that first engagement with what a union means and how it's holding our families down, and then engage them into coming into this work field and being a dues-paying member of our labor. So my suggestion is just to level up.
Yeah, so the bosses have a lot of money, right? But we have people power. And the only way we leverage that power is through the relationships we build with each other. So, as I've been going through this conference, I've been hearing folks talk about, well, how do I get folks more involved in my local? It's the same kind of story for this internal organizing as external organizing. Have an organizing conversation, and that means building a relationship with someone, because that relationship is you can leverage that power together against our system that is hurting everyone. And you can also take that into the community. And as you're talking to folks, find out what do they want? What do they care about? It requires actually listening to people. So for example, on the Persad campaign, which is the LGBTQ mental health facility, I'm going around talking to so many of the LGBTQ plus groups in Pittsburgh, and they're telling me their goals of we want fair housing, we want to not be fired from the job for being gay or lesbian or trans or whatever. We want to be paid fairly. It's hey, our goals actually line up really well here. Let me tell you about this thing called unions. Come to the union side. We got bennies. But actually aligning the goals of what people already want with the organizing you're doing, and you have to do that by building a relationship and listening to people.
All right, thank you, sister. Thank you, panelists. So I think we are right at about at our time to shift, but did you all get something out of this, some inspiration and learn some stuff? All right. So let's give one more big round of applause to our panelists, and let's learn more and kick some ass for the working class.